The member for Light.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I'd like to make just a very brief contribution to this debate. I think, particularly in the context of Part A of the motion, recognising the importance of TAFE as a major education and skills provider in regional South Australia, but also right across the board of South Australia, and particularly in my electorate. From where I stand, Mr Speaker, and certainly from the feedback I'm getting from people in my electorate, people do question this government's commitment to TAFE, the TAFE sector, and certainly the view being put to me that what they can see with this government's ongoing cutting of funds to the TAFE sector is a dismantling and a de-skilling of the TAFE sector. And I'll provide some examples how it impacts on my electorate, the electorate of Light, and more broadly in people in the northern suburbs, because there have been a number of cuts to programs in this area, which actually has, as the member had just spoken, who's mentioned about the additional cost to people who get into the TAFE system, and that's certainly true for people in my electorate. Mr Speaker, there's some courses which have been shifted from Elizabeth TAFE, which service both northern suburbs, and also Gawler, and also some of the Barossa areas in the building trades, and that some of these courses have been moved down to the other end of town, the other end of the city, on the premise that it's actually be better for students to actually have these programs down there, miles away from their homes and miles away, and additional costs for them. One of the courses I understand is actually now being provided through an interstate company online. So as some speakers already mentioned, often a lot of trades require hands-on teaching. It's very important for these people to actually gain hands-on teaching. So again, it's been done cheaper through a company through Victoria, and therefore the students and our young people are the greatest losers from these cuts to the TAFE sector. And that was particularly true, Mr Speaker, and made very obvious to my community last year when TAFE, like many organisations, had to close its doors for a while. They did their best in trying to transfer some of the teaching to online teaching, and I acknowledge that the TAFE administration did do that, and the teachers were keen to do that. But one of the biggest lot of feedback I got from students who do a lot of trades type of training was that a lot of the training did not lend itself to online learning. A lot of the people who do trades studies because they like that face-to-face contact, they like that hands-on training, and that's how they learn. They learn through doing. They learn through in the classroom. They learn through on the job. They learn from actually doing things, and it's very hard to learn that sort of stuff online, Mr Speaker. So this move, which TAFE is moving more things to online, and I understand why they're doing it. They're trying to, with the reduced budgets, trying to maintain their programs and support for students and young people in our communities. It is actually making it much more harder for our young people to actually learn. Mr Speaker, we're often told, and I've been at a number of places where we're often told that this government has decided to make TAFE more competitive. TAFE now operates in a much more competitive vet sector, and we're often given these figures, how much cheaper the private sector can do it compared to TAFE. And it's interesting, and these figures are, in my view, Mr Speaker, quite deceptive. It's like comparing a medical course with a legal studies course, saying that, the law faculty can actually deliver many more law graduates than a medical faculty can in cost. Well, they're two different things. They're two different things. And when you're comparing the cost of running TAFE, and there's a more important point to make here, is that when the government guts TAFE with all the low-cost programs, but high-demand, low-cost programs, and they're given off to the private sector, of course you actually are going to shift all the revenue to the private sector and keep the costs in the public sector. And I'll give you an example, Mr Speaker. Business studies programs are no longer available to TAFE students in Metro Adelaide through TAFE. If you want to do business studies, and all of you got trainees, those who've got trainees, previously you would send your trainee to do their business studies through TAFE. No longer the case. We have to send it to a private provider now. So what this government's done is use some false justification to not actually creating competition, it's actually reducing competition in the marketplace by taking TAFE out of the sector providing training courses in some really key areas. Business studies one. There's a whole range of other programs too where TAFE can no longer compete on the open market for students. So this whole story about trying to create a more competitive sector is just a nonsense. This government is not committed to the TAFE sector. It's keen to dismantle the TAFE sector. It's de-skilling the TAFE sector, and our communities are for the poorer. And not only the communities poorer, regional communities would be poorer for this. TAFE, as the member for Hammond said earlier, TAFE has been the bulwark of education and skills training in regional areas, and quite rightly so. And I think it's very important to remember that in a lot of areas, if it wasn't for the TAFE system, people just wouldn't access post-secondary education. So TAFE, Mr Speaker, as the motion says, is very important to our sector. I do not believe this government's committed to the TAFE sector. What I've seen from my own area is that it's done nothing but actually try to dismantle it, undermine it and de-skill it. And it's also interesting from a political point of view, the current undermining of the current CEO of TAFE. Now, that's very, very interesting. Why all of a sudden why would the government be party to undermining its own CEO? I assume he's actually probably saying, well, some of this stuff is actually hurting our students. He's probably telling the government the truth. And this government doesn't like the truth, and we know that. It gets rid of people who tell it the truth. And so, Mr Speaker, that and this undermining of the CEO is just part of the dismantling of our TAFE sector in this state, when we should be building it up to make sure that we have the skills and abilities in our community for our young people and other people who want to retrain. And there's a whole range of sectors which require additional people. We should be building and supporting the TAFE sector right across the state, and particularly in our regional areas. With these comments, Mr Speaker, I will certainly support those parts of the motion which actually indicate that and recognise that TAFE is very important to the state.